Welcome everyone to our planning board agenda, meeting for this October 4th. The agenda is there before you. Call to order. Declarations of conflict of interest, I see none. Approval of the agenda, so we'll need a motion there. Moved by Bob Kenny, second by Rosemary. All those in favor of the agenda? Unanimous, okay. Adoption of the minutes. I'll need a mover and a seconder for the minutes. If you want to take a minute first, or everyone's good, we can move. Okay, I'll need a mover, so. And do I have a seconder? Shannon, who was the second? Oh, Chris did, okay. So Shannon moved it and Chris seconded. Okay, so any business arising from the minutes? You can publish, if it's, is it in?
No, it's not in.
It's not in the previous minutes, is it? So perhaps under.
Previous minutes. I want to ask about 35 Prince Street, Saigon Cuisine, where that is gone.
Yeah, well, I think it's just going to go to council.
Yeah, well, we exactly, we can, that issue came from council back to staff, so we can send a report to council and indicate where that is.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best part. Yep. Okay, no other business arising from the minutes? I see none. Okay, we'll get into our reports, and the first one, A, is a variance for 14 Apple Drive, and Evan's got the floor. Thank you, Evan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm presenting 14 Apple Drive. Two major variance requests for the subject property. The request is to permit a two-story detached garage on the subject property, and that the maximum permitted floor area be increased from 750 square feet to approximately 1,100, and that the maximum permitted height be increased from 17.5 feet to 22.5 feet. And just as a note, the public notice that went out cited that it was seeking to be increased. The floor area was being doubled from 750 to 1,500. It is actually being proposed to be increased to 1,100, not 1,500. So this application is a revision of an application that the board heard in August. The original application sought a 2,400 square feet detached garage with a height of approximately 27 feet. The board at that time deferred the application, directing the applicant to revise it. So here is the subject property in question, outlined in blue in the middle. It is zoned single detached residential, R1L. The property currently contains a single story, single detached dwelling, which in itself has an attached garage, and there is a shed on the property. The applicant has indicated that the shed will be removed upon construction of the new accessory building. In terms of the surrounding neighborhood, it primarily consists of single-story dwellings, and no other property really has a two-story accessory building such as this. So here is the revised front elevation for the proposed detached garage. The height is proposed to be 22 feet 3 inches. This is an approximately 5-foot reduction from the original proposal, which had over 27 feet of height. And a further change that the board will note is that the removal of the balcony that was originally proposed to be located above the garage door. However, the maximum height for an accessory building on the subject property is only permitted to be 17.5 feet. So while the new 22-foot height proposal is an improvement over the original application, it still exceeds the maximum amount by about 28%. Furthermore, it's worth mentioning that the height of the building is higher than that of the single-story house on the subject property, and is higher than most any building in the surrounding neighborhood, so it puts it up. It doesn't necessarily mesh with the surrounding context. And this is the revised floor plan for the building. As it's stated, its proposed gross floor area is approximately 1,100 square feet. This is a reduction of 1,300 square feet from the original design, which was proposed to be 2,400. And the new proposal measures 25 feet by 30 feet in dimensions. So it has a building footprint of 750 square feet. And then the second story has been changed from a full floor to a partial loft area. And so while the revised gross floor area is an improvement to the original proposal of 2,400 square feet, it continues to exceed the gross floor area maximum allowance of the zoning and development bylaw by approximately 46%, which permitted on the subject property. So this is just a summary of the positives and shortcomings of the application. They're included in your report, so I won't be reading them all out as written. But we'll note that the accessory building is appropriately located and maintains proper setbacks. However, it does appear to be out of scale with the surrounding neighborhood, and even the house located on the subject property, with no other accessory buildings or main buildings with a similar height. One note is that Public Works approved the second driveway access as proposed, despite generally only permitting one driveway access per property. This is due to a second driveway having existed previously, but was removed during the city's implementation of a ditch infilling program. And finally, this application has not received any public comments in support or in opposition. So, as the proposed detached garage does not contextually fit into the surrounding neighborhood, and that the requested variances seek a 28% and 46% increase to what is permitted at a maximum, the Planning and Heritage Department encourages the Planning Board to recommend Council deny the variance requests to increase the maximum permitted accessory building floor area from 750 square feet to 1,098 square feet, and increase the maximum permitted accessory building height from 17.5 square feet to 22.5 square feet, or 22.5 feet, sorry, to permit a new 2-story accessory building located at 14 Apple Drive. Thank you. The applicant is here to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you very much, Evan. Do we have any questions for Evan? Okay, go ahead, Councilor Yanko.
And thank you, Evan. I just noticed that in the summary table that you put up on display is not the same as the one in the package.
Mm-hmm. This one's just abbreviated. I would refer to the report for.
Okay.
I have
Councilor McKay.
questions too, actually, thank you. So, when you're talking the 1,098 square feet, that's both floors, right?
Yeah, that's everything
So his
together.
footprint is.
It's 750.
Range,
Yeah.
okay. And my second question, and I was looking for an answer to this earlier, is if this building was attached via a roof line, would it be an issue?
We haven't reviewed it as such. I do not believe it would be an issue because if it was an addition to the house, it'd be subject to different regulations where we're processing it under accessory building regulations. And the accessory building regulations are the ones that are dictating the gross floor area requirements or limitations, I guess, maximums. So an addition wouldn't necessarily be subject to those same gross floor area maximums.
So with attachment to a roof line, you think it would be, and that's right, okay?
Yeah, because it'd be seen as an addition. I believe.
Okay.
Are we going to public meeting on accessory buildings, though? Is that coming up?
That's already been dealt with by council.
Yeah,
and it's,
we dealt with that.
yeah,
I
so-
thought there's something that various weeks and something here.
This one was applied for as that was working its way through the system, so that's why this one was taken.
Yeah.
But there will be no other ones taken for this, once a decision's made for either for or against this. Accessory buildings cannot be varied the way that he's requesting. So it was just like he applied before we got those amendments through, but the amendments are through.
Chair,
Yes.
I'm curious, I guess we have the applicant here. I'm curious why they didn't choose the addition onto the house where it could be then being as a right. So maybe that's a question to ask.
A question we could probably ask the applicant, Jeff. So I guess then we want to bring the applicant in unless anyone else has questions? No? For now, okay.
Go on for garden feet, something coming up.
I thought we just approved the amendments to that, didn't we?
Coming up.
Yeah, garden suites may be.
Oh, garden suite, sorry.
That's a different.
That's a different.
Secondary suites, garden suites, because
Yeah.
it sounds like this is gonna be used as living space. Too much, like you said last time, that's why it's gonna be used for an office or.
Yeah, cars. Yes, some antique cars. even.
And a gym, because they have a space in the house.
Yep.
Good evening, Stacey, how are you?
Great, guys.
Pretty good. Mr. Driscoll, you're pretty
I
well
think this-
familiar with everybody. I think you've been in here once or twice.
Yes, yeah.
You've got the floor.
Okay, no, definitely. So once again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to put this idea before the planning board. I think there was a question there in regards to why we didn't choose to add on to the house. And we struggled with that. Basically, our house is a rancher or a bungalow, we'll say, and looking for plans to attach onto a bungalow with a bonus room, we'll call it, above. We struggled with finding a plan that was aesthetically pleasing. I've seen some bungalows with an addition to it with a second level, and I haven't seen one that to me looks appealing to the eye or fits in with the area, so to speak, as was mentioned earlier with the detached garage that we have here. So that's the main reason. To be quite honest with you, I couldn't find a plan, or I have not seen a plan that, I'd like to drive by and say, geez, that looks nice. And so so we were back and forth and went back to the detached option. When we look at our property, it is kind of unique where our neighbor on Windermere faces Windermere Avenue or Street. Our neighbor to the other side faces Lynn Avenue. And where the proposed detached garage is going, it's a treed lot. It's divided by a tree line with her neighbor on Windermere and the McPhee's in back as well. So the building itself is in an area where it's not going to be an eyesore. It doesn't stand out from the rest of the properties. I mean, it's not sitting out front. People drive by and say, geez, there's a big garage out front. I feel that aesthetically it is a better option than trying to cookie cut or make a two-level look proper on a bungalow.
Okay. Any other, I guess I have a question too. So the floor space, I think we kind of touched base here a few minutes ago. So 750 square feet is one level, and then there's the top level. Right?
Yes, there's
approximately.
So the concept, and again, I apologize for my first kick at the can here. When we put our first proposal together, I was basing it on footprint. So when I put the plan together, I put it as higher than 750 square feet. It was basically in my mind 1,200 square feet. When I got to the meeting, it was based on floor area, which was close to 2,700 square feet with the balcony. So yes, I'm basically was ignorant of how the process worked. This is my first opportunity at looking at something from ground up.
Yeah.
If you asked me how to renovate an existing building, I would be much more versed in helping you out on that. But so what we did was, when we came back, we said, okay, let's be realistic. We now understand the process a little bit better, not fully. So we went with the footprint of 750 square feet. and looked at a compromise from what we originally wanted and what the rules and regulations were, and thought we came up with the fairest compromise possible.
Okay. And so basically you're about 5 feet tall, more than the allowed height,
Yes.
is that correct?
And when I spoke to the designer at Kent, that could be probably lowered by another foot or two if push came to shove. We could make an amendment to that. It's still going to be higher than the 17.5, but we definitely could look at that if that was if that was a major issue, for sure.
Any other? Yeah, sure, go ahead, Councilman.
Are you still planning to use this for additional living space like you had first said in your first?
Well, not living, well, it depends how you define living space, I guess. My wife is going to use this area for her office. She's working from home now.
Okay.
And I'll call it a / office dual workout area or whatever right now.
Right.
As I stated before, she's right next to the furnace room downstairs, so she doesn't appreciate that too much, so.
So will you have like bathroom and stuff, a washroom in there?
I have proposed a partial bathroom downstairs, and that's just more for my own being, a toilet and a sink. If I'm out working in the garage, I don't want to run back to the house, I'll use it downstairs. So it's not a full bath, it's basically a convenience feature for myself.
And just a question for Evan, if I can.
Sure, yeah.
Is that permitted in these accessory structures to have it as an extension, you know, and you're basically, I mean, call it living space, I mean, it is an addition to what you normally run out of space in your house. Is that permitted use with an accessory structure? To have like a...
I believe so, like, whenever you get a little bit more intensive with a bedroom and a kitchen and stuff, that's when we would start defining it as a garden suite.
Of course.
So this would be connected to the main dwelling's water and sewer, I presume?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
It's not a separate water sewer, it's just connected to your house.
I'm hoping so.
Any other questions for the applicant while he's here? Okay, we're pretty good. Thank you very much for coming in.
Okay.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, folks, so,
I have a
yes.
question, when I'm thinking of this, I think we had an application, if I recall, on Maverick Road or something similar, right? But they had the full upstairs ready to go for a garden suite. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that,
Yes.
it was already, and we didn't really do anything at that point with that because it was already done? I'm just trying to get my understanding. Is that
That's
correct?
correct. It was already built. Yeah.
Right, okay. But that was a full established secondary. It was ready to go as a garden suite, right? Okay.
Yeah, you could rent that space, you could rent it out or whatever, right? This here,
Yes.
this here is,
But it's still there. I don't think we ever did anything.
no, I don't know if we ever went anywhere with that, no.
Okay. No, just-
But
So
anyway,
you get another thing, but she still needs to be out with that.
so are we comfortable to go to a movement or do we want to talk some more on it?
Should
or-
I just make a comment?
Sure.
My struggle with this is that the staff are recommending that we deny the request because it doesn't fit the requirements. And, you know, if we approve this, where does it put us for future considerations where we might be in a situation where we're denying? We have guidelines, if we don't follow them.
This is the last one that we can even consider after, right?
Yeah.
After this, they can't even ask, correct?
Correct, yep.
So this is the last one that you would be able to,
And is there some particular reason about this application that we feel that, you know, gives support for why we should approve this when the staff are recommending against it? Is there something special about this request?
Well, I think over the years, we approve and disapprove, go against staff's recommendation. Staff gives us the ideal situation as far as what can be allowed, and that's not to say that planning board has to agree or that council has to agree. That's the fun part about politics, I guess, right? And when you're in a political ring, but I guess you got to look at the changes that are being made and how significant are they. You take, he kind of suggested that it's going to be against a tree line, so his height isn't going to stand out like it would, say, on Queen Street, where he's in an area there that's he's got the space for it. It's just we have certain requirements, and he's over above that. I'm not really for it against it. I'm just trying to if you were saying why would you want to vote for it, well, I guess the point is that he has reduced it to 750. He's taken away the balcony. He's showing that he's trying to work with council, but at the same time, rules are rules, and that's why we're here.
Still an additional 46%.
Yeah, it's a good size chunk of a building, and I guess so. Having that 46%, that takes in the 2 floors. Like this, his building is only 750 square feet.
Yeah,
but because he has the
exactly.
Yeah.
That's, so the building itself, the footprint takes up the whole 750 square
Right.
feet. And then with the addition of the loft, it becomes the 1,100 square feet. And so we currently only allow a gross floor area
Right.
maximum of 750.
right. So if we were to get him to reduce the height of the building by 2 feet or whatever, what does that change things any?
The height would still be over and above the 17.5 maximum
Yeah.
that we allow. It wouldn't be over as much. I think it'd still be over more than what a minor variance would be.
Right.
So,
Okay.
I have a problem with the height for the surrounding properties, so I'll not be supporting.
Okay.
My feeling is if you outgrow your current house, then you sell it and you go to something bigger to get accommodation.
The
Any other?
applicant does have an option to build on and, and continue to look for, I know they mentioned they couldn't quite find aesthetically something pleasing with a full addition, but perhaps there is something out there that would.
Any other comments or concerns before we ask for a motion? Okay, so after all the discussion, all right, we'll need a motion. If anyone cares to do so? I think pretty quiet again, right? So we're either for it or we're against it, but we need to make, if you're strongly against it, Bob, then
Yeah, do you want a motion? I
Yeah.
move we follow the staff's recommendation and reject the application.
okay, and do I have a seconder for that? Okay, so moved by Kenny, seconded by Rosemary, that we agree with staff's recommendation to not approve. All those in favor? Oh, and just, Basil, my apologies, I forgot to introduce you at the very start. But, so all those in favor, and just 1 second, Basil, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is in favor. You, Basil, in favor of staff recommendation or not?
In favor.
In favor, and then against is 1. So Councillor McCabe against. So you'll be getting a hold of him then. Cool. Thank you very much. That's a tough one, guys. These things are never easy. The rezoning, 38 Palmer's Lane, Laurel.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I should have mentioned that early in the meeting, I have a conflict on this.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Call me back in.
Yeah,
No,
and-
thank you.
Yeah, and just to explain to the people watching, my apologies to resident member Basil Hamley. Basil is online. We have 4 resident members here, and we have Basil online, and we have the 3 councillors. So just hello, Basil, and thank you for calling in.
You were last time.
I conflict?
I think so.
I don't know, they tell me I am. I haven't served coffee in well over a year, so I'm not familiar with the conflict.
No, you're right.
But I think they told me I was in conflict the last time I was against the project, so I'm not really sure.
Yeah, well, you're not on the payroll.
Huh?
You're not on the
No,
payroll.
I don't, no
There's no financial gain to be made from this.
No, there wasn't then really either.
No.
Just saying.
It's up to yourself.
I don't feel like I'm in conflict
Well,
right
then,
at all. So if there is.
Good, let's move ahead. Laura, it's all yours.
Okay, so this is a request to proceed to public consultation to rezone the property located at 38 Palmer's Lane, right here, and a portion of this PID. So the request is to rezone from R2 low-density residential to R3T medium-density residential townhouse. And this portion of this property here will be rezoned from R4 to R3T, medium-density residential. So that portion would be downsized. There's also an application to amend Appendix A of the official plan from low-density residential to medium-density residential for the greater PID right here. So the property's bounded to the north by Palmer's Lane, right here. Which is, and there's R2 zone properties on the opposite side of the street, to the east by R4 zone properties, the apartment buildings, and then there's commercial along St. Peter's Road, which would be MUC, to the south with single detached dwellings, and there's also some MUC a little bit further east of the single detached. And to the west, it's low-density R2 zone properties, so all along Palmer's Lane, right here. So the application is to rezone the one lot and a portion of that PID, and it's approximately 0.6 of an acre in total. And the main property, the R2 property that's zoned low-density residential, is currently vacant. Portion of the adjoining property that's being considered, it's occupied by parking for the existing 12-unit apartment buildings. So the proposal is to construct 2 townhouse dwellings consisting of 1 4-unit building and 1 8-unit building on the property. This is the site plan. This is the 4-unit, and this would be the 8-unit building. And the bylaw requires 2,099 square feet of lot area per unit for a townhouse and 1,507 square feet of lot area for stacked townhouse. So this building at the back would be a stacked townhouse, and the one up front is just 4 units, not stacked, along the streetscape. So the R3T zone, if these properties are zoned to that, use, the properties are able to accommodate the 12 units. And the 4-unit townhouse, it's proposed along Palmer's Lane. It will have a 2-story facade. So this would be the building along Palmer's Lane, it's right along here, and that would be 2 stories. And then because of the elevation of the land, at the back of the building, it would be 2.5 stories, and you can see the gabled dormers on it. Parking for this townhouse is at the rear of the building, and the second townhouse building, 8-unit, is proposed to be constructed at the back of the lot between the 4-unit and the one up front. This would also be a 2.5 story and would fall to 3 stories as well at the back. The parking for this portion of the property is right here, and that's that portion that would be consolidated, this little piece right here. So they would utilize a portion of the existing parking lot. A total of 12 parking spaces are required for the development at the back of the lot. So in comparison to the 2 existing 12-unit buildings, the proposed footprint for the townhouses, they're longer. However, the massing is broken up along the streetscape with individual entryways and facades for each unit. The buildings are proposed to be 2.5 stories with the gable dormers, as I said. I'm just going to go ahead again so you can see them. And the adjacent apartment buildings are 2.5 stories in height with a hip roof. So One will have, you can kind of see, I should have taken a picture of the apartment building, but you can kind of see here, this building has a hip roof. These have the gable dormers. It would go up to 3 stories, but these dormers give it a 2.5 story look. So it's not a full 3 stories. So with zoning within the neighborhood is R2. It's low density single family and 2-unit buildings to the west as well as on the opposite side of the street. That's in contrast to the 2.5 story R4 apartment buildings to the east. So the reason why I'm saying this, there's a transition. So if you look to the east, the apartment buildings, they transition to commercial with the car dealership and real estate offices, etc. on St. Peter's Road. The lot in question contained a single family dwelling at one time, but it was demolished in 2010. So if the townhouses are constructed, it will result in a step zone between the apartment buildings and the commercial zoning that's to the east, and it will transition down towards the lower density development along Palmer's Lane. So staff would note that the highest density allowable in the R3T zone are townhouses. If the rezoning were to occur, a landscape buffer would be required to be retained along the boundary of the proposed development and any low density development that would back onto it. And I'm sure you're aware there have been several requests to rezone this property in the past, and the most recent one was in September of 2019, and that request was to rezone the property to R3 medium density residential, and that was to accommodate an 18-unit apartment building. Staff didn't support the request at that time due to the bulk, mass, and scale of the proposed building. Council did approve the rezoning request, however, the application was denied at an appeal at the Island Regulatory and Appeals Commission. So I've listed within the report other previous applications on the property because there were other ones from 2009 and 2010. If you look at the report, it goes into some detail and background on them. The key points in the official plan to consider would be compact urban form, infill development, and sustaining Charlottetown's neighborhoods, and also housing needs and variety when you consider this application. They are also included in the report for the board to review. So with previous applications on this property, the applicant proposed higher density development that staff felt did not result in any form of transitional zoning between the R4 zoned apartment buildings to the east and low density R2 zoning to the west. Just going to flip through some of these. This is what's being proposed now, and this is an overview of the site so you can kind of get to see the layout of what they're proposing. This was in contrast to the 2.5 story apartment building and commercial development on the east along St. Peter's Road. The September 2019 application proposed 3 stories for the 18-unit apartment building, and rezoning the lot to R3 medium density residential would have allowed higher density to move further along Palmer's Lane. And that would not have provided any form of transition or buffer between the existing apartment buildings and the low density development. So these 2 apartment buildings, essentially what would have happened if an apartment building would have been located here, it would have just moved that higher density further and like closer to the low density development and further along Palmer's Lane. The current request to go to R3T results in more of a transition between these buildings and steps down to the lower density development. So the density is broken up between the 2 buildings. The 4-unit is along the streetscape, and it will provide infill development along the streetscape. And it's sort of like a stepped approach. So it would be, you would have your zoning decreased from R4, R3 to R2. And I should also note within that R2 zone there are also single detached dwellings. So just because it's zoned R2 doesn't mean it's all semis or duplexes. So, and I just want to note that in general practice in zoning is to mitigate conflicts is to have a stepped approach to zoning. So you don't locate a high density development right next to a low density or vice versa. We like to include uses in between higher density and low density, such as semi-detached or townhouse dwellings, and it just kind of, it breaks up the zones more. So I've included in the report a quick summary of the positive attributes and neutral and attributes and shortcomings. So in conclusion, although we know that residents, they may have concerns with the proposal to locate the townhouses on this property, staff feel that the proposal is more in line with the policies of the official plan, and that it supports appropriate infill development within the existing neighborhood. We feel that the application has merit, and we would like to send it to public consultation to gauge the public's opinion. So our recommendation is to proceed to public consultation.
Okay, thank you very much, Laurel. Any questions for Laurel?
Well, can I just ask a logistical question about the access to that back unit?
Oh, yes.
Because I think, can you go through a different other site to access something on a separate site?
Yeah, you can.
You can,
So
okay.
they would need a right-of-way agreement.
Okay.
It's the same property owner, so they would have a right-of-way agreement to access their property, which would be here, and that piece would be consolidated with the greater lot. So as long as they have access, they have frontage on a public street, they're okay to do that.
Okay.
And I should note too, the architect is here, so if there's any questions relating to the design or anything technical, then he is here to answer questions.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question. That piece that's being amalgamated with the apartment new building on the west, that still leaves adequate parking for the other two buildings, I assume?
Yes, it does. Yeah, there's all kinds of parking.
Go ahead, Councillor Yanko.
So the last time we saw this application in 2019, it was for 18 units.
Yes.
So now we've stepped down to
12.
an 8 and a 4.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the 4 unit, correct me if I'm wrong, the 4 unit townhouse will be the facade if you're driving down Palmer's Lane.
Palmer's Lane, and there won't be driveways along Palmer's Lane. Should have pointed that out. The driveways will be in behind.
You'll be using that other driveway between the apartment buildings.
Yeah,
Current
so
driveway.
if you look here, they'll come in this lane and they'll go over here. Oh, sorry. They'll come in here off Palmer's Lane, and then the driveways and parking is behind the townhouses. So there would be garages that would go down underneath the townhouses, and then also dedicated parking outside of the garages.
But they would still, if they were driving home with their groceries, they would still be driving down Palmer's Lane to get around.
Yes, they have to drive down Palmer's Lane.
They just
during-
don't have driveways on Palmer's Lane.
No, exactly.
So the
No
traffic-
driveways on
so
Palmer's
the
Lane.
traffic will still be.
On Palmer's Lane.
What about the 8 unit? Will they still access the 8 unit through Palmer's Lane?
Palmer's Lane. They will go in the existing access for the, between these two apartment buildings. So there's a building here and here. They're gonna utilize that existing driveway to access their parking, which would be right here. And then they would go to the building via 2 walkways, where the other building has a driveway off of Palmer's Lane to the parking in behind. So there would be one additional access on Palmer's Lane from what there is now. Technically, the single-family dwelling did have an access there, and
Right.
this would use that
And is
access.
there any other way in for these 12 units besides coming in off of Palmer?
I don't think
No.
Okay, so
so.
they don't have some other, so all of these units will come in through Palmer's?
Yeah, otherwise you'd have to cross people's properties here.
Right. Yeah. Sure. Okay, thank you.
Rosemary, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just a clarification question. So this property has been, we've had applications in 2009, 2010, 2019, a lot of public opposition every time.
Mhm.
Is it the same developer bringing forward this application as the previous 3? And has there been any consultation with the people in the area, given the
It
opposition
is.
from the past?
Yeah, it is the same developer. The developer has indicated to me that if they are granted approval to proceed to public consultation, that they plan to meet with the public prior to the city having their public meeting. So they're going to go door to door apparently and speak to some of the residents and see if there's anything that they need to change.
Be a smart idea.
So there's been no consultation to date?
Not to date.
Well, I guess to be fair to the developer, I guess until it passes the planning staff stage, I guess there didn't be much sense.
Although we've seen evidence of,
Right.
you know, other applications
Yeah.
where there has been public consultation between the
Yeah,
developer
right.
and residents, and I think it's very beneficial.
I think perhaps the developer probably has a pretty good idea what the neighborhood needs, you know, and what the wants are of the neighborhood after going through those calls. So I assume if he can get to here, then he'll probably go there. I guess we hope anyway. But anyway, Councilor Yankoff.
I mean, it's nice to see the applicant recognizing the residents' concerns from the last application. So it's certainly refreshing to see that they are looking at addressing some of those concerns. I will support staff's recommendation for public consultation, because that would be a great opportunity to gauge what the residents in the area, where their comfort levels are.
Any other, Chris?
Oh, I was gonna second your.
You'll second that? Okay, no other questions? Do we want to have the applicant in, or are we kind of comfortable just going ahead with a motion and wait for a public consultation? Okay, cool. So we have a motion on the floor by Councilor McCabe and
Councilor Yankoff.
Councilor Yankoff. You shouldn't be sitting together. Get me confused. Councilor Yankoff. And seconded by Chris Forney that we take staff's recommendation and go to a public consultation. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's unanimous.
Don't forget about Basil.
Oh yeah, jeez, Basil. I gotta put his picture there. Basil, how are we voting?
I in favor as well.
Okay, thank you, Basil.
Picture your cardboard cutout.
Yeah, that's what they do on the cards. I can't even get the names right, never mind. Anyway, thank you very much, Laura. Okay, I guess Laura, you're back up again. We have 25 McLeod Court, which is a request to amend and approve a site-specific exemption. And Alex, come back in the room.
Okay. This one is a little shorter, but Coles Associates, and on behalf of the property owner, Dr. William Best, has made an application for site-specific exemption from section 37.1 of the bylaw to allow a medical, health, and dental office as defined in the zoning and development bylaw. So that section is the permitted uses within that zone, the M2 zone. The properties in question are these two properties, and their PID numbers 112-3686 and 110-6400. So if approved, the site-specific exemption would allow a medical clinic containing an ophthalmologist office to be constructed on these two properties. The request also involves a lock and consolidation of those two properties as well. The properties, they're zoned M2 heavy industrial, and although McLeod Crescent falls under heavy industrial zoning, the subdivision was developed within the last decade, and businesses on the street consist mainly of business park commercial uses, medical health offices, retail and light industrial uses. So although the M2 industrial zone allows for more intensive uses, it also accommodates less intensive uses such as retail and office space. So due to the nature of existing development in the area, the property owner has requested the exemption to section 37.1 permitted uses in the M2 zone. So, as per the bylaw, if the site-specific exemption is approved, proceed to public consultation. Staff will notify the public of the meeting in accordance with the requirements in the zoning and development bylaw. So this is the site. So as per section 3.11.1A of the bylaw, council may approve a site-specific exemption to the permitted uses and any regulations in any zone where the site-specific exemption is not contrary to the official plan. And staff does not consider this application as being contrary to the official plan. Section 3.11D also requires that the proposal does not undermine the overall integrity of any given zone, is in the public interest, and is consistent with overall good planning principles. Staff has examined the existing land uses on McLeod Court and within the immediate area, and given the established uses within this area, staff does not feel that the addition of a medical health office will undermine the overall integrity of the M2 zone either. So this area of Mount Edward Road began to develop pre-amalgamation in the early 1980s as an industrial area. Originally, some of the uses that located within this area, they were more heavy industrial in nature, and then after the city amalgamated over time, uses were more business park, industrial, and commercial in nature, such as car dealerships, retail stores, building supply stores, offices, health offices, restaurants, and salons began to locate in that area. And as a result of the uses that located on McLeod Court, staff do not deem this request to be out of context for the area. There's also a professional building containing a dental office located immediately across the street from the subject properties. On this side of the street, I think it's this building. Oh, it's this building right here. So, along with the application for site-specific exemption, as I said, a lot consolidation will be required, and this is to allow for the parking on the opposite site. So the building is here, and then the parking would be here. I'm just going to flip through to some of the elevations of the building. This would be the front of the building. This is the back of the building. So the front faces the parking lot, and then the end of the building right here would face McLeod Court, and then so this is the end that would face McLeod Court. And you can see the back of the building right here. We have a better, I guess I don't. Yeah, you can kind of see the back portion just right here. So there's sections in the official plan that support appropriate industrial development within the Sherwood industrial area, and there's also sections in the official plan that talks about advancing economic development, and they're included within the report. And I've also included a summary of some of the application's positive attributes, neutral attributes, and shortcomings for your review. So staff does not view this request for a site-specific exemption as being contentious or incompatible for the area. And staff feels that this proposal has merit, and we're not adverse to recommending the application to proceed to public consultation to gauge the public's opinion. So if there's any questions, I'll try and answer them.
Thank you very much, Laura. Any discussion?
Move to support staff's recommendation to proceed with public
Okay.
consultation.
Moved by Councilor McCabe, seconded by Bob Kenny. That we go ahead with staff's recommendation to go to a public consultation. All those in favor? And Basil?
In favor?
Good, thank you. Okay, that was a shorter one, Laura. Okay, we're on to Towers Road.
familiar with this one. And it's a request for approval of the final architectural design drawings and working site plans for townhouse dwellings located within the CDA zone on the corner of Mount Edward Road and Towers Road, right here. These two properties. This development concept proposal was before the board in August of 2020 and proceeded to public consultation on the 13th of August 2020. On September 14th, 2020, Council passed a resolution to approve the proposed development concept plan, which included a site plan and building renderings. The applicant has since submitted building permit applications for 3 of the proposed townhouses, and as per the requirements of the Comprehensive Development Area Zone, staff are advancing the working site plans and final architectural drawings and renderings for the townhouses. So staff have reviewed the working site plan that was submitted with the building permit application, and it is consistent with the approved conceptual site plan that formed part of the development agreement. So this was the site plan that formed part of the development agreement, and the one below, it's acting weird, is the working site plan that was submitted with the application. So the site plan is in line, but there were some changes in design and use of materials from the architectural drawings that were submitted for building permit approval compared to the building design presented at the public meeting. And some of the changes to consider: concept plans presented at the public meeting. Building renderings showed a more modern design with eaves and window trim that was flush with the building walls. You can kind of see this here, the window trim. Exterior cladding consisted of a combination of vertical metal siding and horizontal vinyl siding with wood and brick veneer on the first story. So there was the horizontal vinyl and then the metal and then wood and brick down here. Building articulation consisted of staggered single and double style bump outs with gabled roofs. Bump outs included a facade with 2 garage doors and bump outs with single garage doors. So you can see that some of the bump outs were combined into 2, where you had 2 garage doors, and then it was staggered to single, and then it went on to another single and further on to 2. So the architectural plans and renderings submitted with the building permit application. Building renderings show a more traditional design with eaves having a traditional 1.5 to 2 foot overhang. You can see right here. Window trim consists of vinyl trim around windows and stone lintels and trim on brick facade. So vinyl here, and then you've got the stone lintels here. Exterior cladding consists of a combination of brick veneer on townhouse units and horizontal vinyl siding on other townhouse units. Each unit will be fully clad in brick and vinyl. Building articulation consists of single bump outs with gabled roofs and along the full face of the building. Each bump out has a single car garage. So it's as it goes along the streetscape, there's a rhythm of just like one unit, where opposed to the other one that had a unit, 2, a unit, and then 2. It was kind of broken up a bit more. So as per the CDA zone requirements, the final architectural design drawings and working site plans for the development of the property are required to be resubmitted to Planning Board and Council to ensure consistency with the development concept plan. So as a result, staff are requesting the board's review the drawings as per the changes and provide direction and comment. So due to the difference between architectural concept plans that were presented at the public meeting and final architectural drawings that were submitted at building permit approval time, staff needs to determine if the board regards the changes as significant enough to proceed to a public meeting, or if the board deems the new drawings as being consistent with the overall development concept plan. So staff would point out there are no specific design criteria or design review process for the development in the CDA zone. The CDA zone is kind of an innovative zone where the developer proposes the project, the style, the design, the layout, the density of their project. It's meant to be a flexible zone. But once they present that building design and layout is approved through presentation of the concept plans at a public meeting, and the approved concept plans and design are bounded by a development agreement. So the bylaw does allow for amendments to a development concept plan, and the process for major amendments requires a public meeting, while minor amendments that do not change the approved intent of the use or lot, it can be approved by the development officer. In this case, staff are unsure as to the extent. There is quite a difference with the design. But although building form, use, and density are the same as the approved development concept plan. So the building design and materials for the townhouses differ from what was approved through the public meeting and subsequent development agreement. However, if you look at the scale, the design of the buildings, or the scale, the mass of the building, and the quality of the architecture, they're quite similar. So staff did indicate verbally at the August board meeting that they were not opposed to the revised architectural design of the townhouses. Both of those designs are comparable in quality. The differences basically come down to architectural style and taste. However, it is difficult for staff to determine the expectation of the public when a set of plans are taken to a public meeting and then they come in different at building permit time. So therefore, the board must provide a recommendation to council with regard to whether they feel that proposed changes are acceptable or warrant a follow-up public meeting. So in conclusion, staff are requesting the board to either concur with the proposed design changes or deem them to be substantive enough to go back to a public meeting. So there's two options. You can either agree to accept the architectural plans as submitted for the townhouses and recommend to council for approval of the plans as submitted, or recommend to council to refer the plans back to a public meeting. If the proposed changes are approved, then an amendment to the development agreement would be required. So given that both architectural designs for the townhouses are comparable in bulk, scale, and quality, staff are prepared to support option one if the board chooses to go that way.
Thank you very much, Laura. Question here, Councilor Yankovic.
Is this Groundhog Day? I mean, we were here and did the same thing. We went back to council. We specifically asked a legal opinion, and Mr. Hooley at that time said that there must be a recommendation come from staff. And here we are again getting a prepared to support where it was crystal clear from Mr. Hooley that we are supposed to get a recommendation from staff. And so I'm not prepared to vote on this until we have this either amended, that it's a true recommendation from staff or not, because we're not planners. So if staff has a difficult time to proceed, how in the name of time are we supposed to?
But as per the bylaw, staff are required to point out if there's changes or not to a concept plan, and we have done that within the report. Staff doesn't have we don't have we're not adverse to either design. We're not in the position to state whether the board should accept this or not. We're stating that there isn't a difference in the bulk scale or mass of the buildings. It boils down to design. We're not adverse to either design. They're both good quality buildings. The design quality is good. We can't tell the board that they need to accept these changes or not. The CDA zone is different from other zones within the city, and the process for adopting a comprehensive development plan and the working site plans it's a different process than other areas of the zoning and development bylaw. So if this come in and everything was the same as the original, we would recommend that it is similar to the original site plan and concept drawings, and that we feel that it's in line, but it's up to the board and council to determine whether they want to accept them.
Okay. Before we go any further, the applicant is here. Mr. Kane is here, so do we want to save some of our questions to him, or would you just prefer?
Well, mine is kind of, and maybe I have to ask him that question, but my question is kind of like Councillor Yankovic, you saw this application, and I'm understanding what you're saying. Maybe it's a design thing, it doesn't follow any of our bylaws or whatever, that's one thing. But it's the process part that's kind of confusing me. We already did this, we already had lengthy discussion about whether or not we felt it's a hot project. It was whether we want to fire the public up again, do we not want to fire the public up again on a design thing. Personally, I like the second design better than this design. It looks better, it's going to suit better, but again, he had this option as the applicant to come to the public meeting. We already did all this, get to the public meeting, pull it back, come apply for footing changes, which is obviously going to support the new design. I mean, I'm not a contractor, but I'm pretty confident that your footings have to probably match what you're intending to build at the end. And now we're back here doing the same thing. That bugs me. I'm just saying.
Well, that was the
Hard to want to support that.
applicant's
But,
request.
but if I may, you know, what we're doing here this evening is we kind of got to keep the footing thing and all that out of the equation, right? Because there's multiple factors to this plan, and right now we're dealing with the townhouses and the changes made by the applicant. So
It's kind of backdoor stuff too, you know.
I know,
it all-
well,
it's hard to
I agree.
see it on the uppity up when
Yep,
it's coming
I agree.
at you all this way, me personally anyway.
Where staff is with this, I mean, we can point out the differences in the concept plans, which we did. And basically what this boils down to, because they put a design in that the bulk, the mass, the scale, the quality
it's all there.
is all there that went to the public meeting, but the look of the buildings, the style, the design has changed. So I mean, we're pointing that out. We're not adverse to either design, but does the board feel that they want this to go back to a public meeting to gauge the public's opinion? Because we're not, I mean, like I said in my report, staff aren't able to determine if the public would be adverse to this. They may not be. It may not even be an issue. But we just have to point out those differences. So, I mean, they're both good quality design. I would think the public would be adverse to it if the design was inferior. In this case, the design isn't inferior. It's just a different design.
Go ahead, Council.
And thank you, Laurel. You did a fantastic report as usual. I'm just going back to, the legal advice on this specific project, this is not an example of others, was that we, as a planning board, are expected to get from staff a recommendation to proceed one way or the other, not a prepared to support. And this was based on this exact one. This isn't about some other plan or some other different one. This was here. We were all here and talked about this exact thing, were we not? Yeah.
So,
Just Mr. Chair.
yeah, I was going to ask you to do.
Am I missing, like, staff are prepared to support it, am I missing something there?
Well, I think
And
that.
change your wording to recommendation, then do like
I
everything
think-
else is. It should be a staff
Yeah.
recommendation.
What's the difference
You know,
between?
like, if you, we're indifferent, but again, as Laurel pointed out, usually these things, we're there to look at some technical component based upon a criteria. That doesn't exist here. We're pointing out, it's clearly delegated to council to make the decision. We're prepared to support it. The recommendation, whether you want to call it a recommendation or not, I'm indifferent. But the bottom line is that we have to advise you as to what you're making your decision on. This has already been to a public meeting with a contract on it. It's not for staff to unwind the contract. It's up to council and planning board. If you're comfortable, Laurel's pointed out the changes. We're prepared to support it, but it's planning board and council's decision as to whether they want to do that.
With all due respect, Alex, that's the same way it is with every process, but the difference is the wording every other time is staff's recommendation. If they use the word, this time you're using different wording, and I'm perplexed to understand why we're using different wording this time, when every other time it's the same process. You're giving us a recommendation, and it's still our decision to make, but we're not getting a recommendation, we're getting a support, prepared to support. I am prepared to recommend to council that we support the new drawings, but not unless we have the proper wording in this. in
So, I think most of us here this evening are on the same page. I think it's a much improved design or changes to the facade of the building, but you know, I guess the bottom line is, well, how does the public going to see this? And I think that's the kicker. And it's, again, staff is in the same boat. They can't really make a recommendation because they don't know how staff are going to feel or how the public is going to feel. So it is a very complicated process here. But I believe Shalom was next, then you, Rosemary. Go ahead, Shalom.
Yeah, I guess just one comment, like I think the only issue I have is the way that sort of this is worded, like, I definitely don't think this should go back to the public for them to comment on the design. I don't think that's the
Yeah,
proper process, and I don't think that they should be allowed to comment on specific designs. I think that sets a bad precedent. But in this report, it says, do you deem these changes to be substantive enough to go back to a public meeting? And I think personally that's where I get stuck, because I do feel like those are substantial changes. And so if that's the question being asked to me, then I would have to say, send it back to a public meeting, even though I really don't think that's the appropriate process. So I really don't know how to even kind of vote on this, to be honest.
Right.
I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So, Rosemary.
I just had a question around process, because I think it was our August meeting, wasn't it, that we had a lot of debate around this? And we sent a recommendation to council that we thought it was a major, we thought it was a significant change, and we did recommend that it go to public consultation. Am I correct in that? So I'm kind of confused around how it's back here and why we're being asked to reconsider it when we already considered it and made a recommendation to council.
I'll try, I guess. In the report to us the first time, it was verbally told to us that staff was kind of thinking it wasn't worth going to a public meeting, but they never put it in writing. This time around, they've kind of put it in writing again.
Well, I think it went to a public meeting.
Yeah.
The developer pulled the application.
Yeah.
And why is that strange?
I have no
Can we ask
idea.
that question?
I have no idea
We can
why,
ask him when he
because
comes in. We will ask.
this would have been finalized by now.
100% this.
I think
is
it's
a long
more,
time.
it's not so much that the public needs to comment on the design, but it's that they should, like, I think the reason why the board referred it back is to inform the public that there were changes.
And maybe this can be helpful. There's a reason when, in the CDA zone, when you do a contract based upon the public meeting, why it has to come back to planning board and council. It's for council to go, yes, because if it's just up to staff, things can change like crazy, and council wanted to see, is that what we approve? This is what really this is about. So it's just a matter of, it's looping back. They come every month, or not every month, but every time there's a CDA zone, there's a phasing in it, it comes back. Usually they're close enough. This is one where there's a change, but all staff are saying is that the change is, it's a change in design. We didn't ask for the design that was sent. There was no criteria. The applicant showed the design. So again, he showed a new design. They're very similar, as Laurel has pointed out. Whether you want to call it support or recommend, I'm indifferent. But the reality is that, but it's ultimately up to council, because they are the ones that were at the public meeting and heard the original submission, and we prepared a development agreement on that, everything that flowed from that meeting. So that's where we are.
We prepared a development agreement based on this. And when they come in for a permit, this is what they come in with. So, I mean, yes, they're townhouses, yes, the use is the same, yes, the footprint's the same. Like essentially the footprint's the same. There's a little bit of difference with the two bump outs. But the bulk, the mass, and the scale is the same, but the buildings do have two totally different looks. So we're not staff doesn't really have, both designs are nice. They're both good quality designs. But if you were looking at it and, you know, you looked at this building and you looked at the one that came in previously, yes, they are both different looking buildings. One is more modern, one is more traditional looking. So it's, I mean,
Go
Six of one, half a dozen of the other.
To build a little bit on what both Rosemary and Helen said, I believe it was the August meeting. So without a recommendation from staff like we get with every other thing, ultimately, yes, it is council's decision at the end, but we always get a recommendation, and that's what happened. We had those same discussions last August, and because we didn't get a recommendation, as Shalyn pointed out, then we're back to the question that we're being asked. Where's our, we can't be comfortable with that if we're based on these questions. So we are exactly back, circling this back around, that none of us are comfortable with answering these questions without a staff recommendation, unless I'm hearing this wrong. And if the wording is so not that it's all the same, then why don't we put it back to the same way it is with every other report we have?
Can I just ask a question too? Because it seems apparent that when the recommendation went from this committee to council, the council did approve and vote for having this go back to public consultation, because it was on the agenda for the public meeting, and then it got pulled.
Yeah.
So council did accept the recommendation that came from this committee in August. So I'm still confused as to why we are reconsidering this when council already made a decision to go to public consultation. It was on the agenda, and then it didn't get considered.
Well, it'd be safe to say.
Well, actually, maybe for some clarity, I mean, this has been a complicated application. I mean, so the applicant didn't go to the public hearing. There's potential litigation on this, so through the solicitor and the applicant's request, he was offered a phased permit with the caveat that he had to come back to council to finish the process that he had started. So that's where he is now. And again, as I indicate, like the word support or recommend, staff are indifferent. We'll accept either. But support to me is recommend. So we support it, we recommend it. If you would like to have that clarified, we're prepared to make that clarification.
I think we would like it to say recommend, right?
That's the way all the other ones are, is a recommendation.
So
would you like me to scratch out support and say staff are
Staff
prepared to recommend
option-
for option one?
Option one, yep.
Amend the report.
Yeah. And,
Yeah, I think you should have the applicant.
I was just gonna say, we'll probably ask if Kane wants to come in there to speak. I think he's out in the hallway, I believe.
And then just if I could,
Yep.
then to clarify Rosemary's question, that might be a better clarification of why we are back, because this time we're actually looking at a recommendation from staff on how we are going to send this to council, whereas before we didn't have any of that.
We didn't have that. It makes a difference.
I'm still confused about the public meeting thing. So like, because they pulled the application, it just got circumvented back here? Like,
There's a whole there's quite a long backstory. But maybe and again, it's that was the accommodation that was made. He's got a phased permit. But again, I'm trying to make this as clear as possible. Let's say the original design, the reason that this section is in the bylaw, staff have very little oomph or little clout. So if the first proposal was put in and the design was significantly inferior, it was totally different in regard to design, and people were uncomfortable with the design. The intent is so that council can hold a public hearing to again get the feedback. So you're at this stage that it's beyond, the changes are beyond what staff are comfortable with. We don't have that ability to make that change. It's coming back. But I think, and I mentioned it last month, I would look at this if you were at the public hearing, the original public hearing, and this was presented, would you have an issue with it? And make your determination based upon that.
The other thing I would point out too, though, on the flip side of that, is I don't believe that applicants should present one thing to the public and then come in with totally different plans as far as design. So I mean, I think this might be a lesson to the developer. you know, even if it is approved. But I think when you're dealing with the CDA zone, I think, you know, they should be cognizant of what they're presenting to the public.
Was he informed of that what he presented is what he knows? Does he know that?
He's done this several times.
Because I would have known that. When I looked at those plans that night, I wasn't really thinking concept of look of building cosmetically. So that's why when this all started coming out, I was like, I understand it very well now.
But, I mean, as Alex said, this isn't an inferior design. If they would have come in with something that, you know, was
And that's
really
what
cheap in
process is
materials.
there. We can't tell, like, if he came in and we got into a debate, so a developer comes in, he presents something to the public, council prepare a contract as to what council told us to prepare, which are the elevations, and then if they're inferior, we can't say, we need a mechanism to make, council wants to make sure they're getting what they bought, really. This is what this whole loop is about.
It is, yeah.
So so we're just in that, and you just have to make a determination. There's two different designs there. They're of, it's hard to say equal quality, but similar quality. And if the board is comfortable with that, council or staff are prepared to support, recommend this amended change. And we will have to, if it does get approved by council, we have to redo the development agreement to submit these drawings to make sure that they're submitted.
Right. Okay, so we want to bring the applicant in, Laura? So we'll see.
Yeah, I can do that.
Welcome again.
What? Persistence pays off.
Yeah, a little easier to breathe.
What?
A little easier to breathe. So you have a few minutes here to give a quick
I'd love to
presentation.
discuss this.
Yeah.
Can I plug a memory stick in on just a quick little few slides that we have of our own? Do you mind? Is that all right? I mean, I'm not going to try to take a whole lot of time.
Yeah, no. Ellen, maybe you, yeah.
Thanks. Any questions in the meantime? Why we're here again?
Yes, I do. I have a couple questions.
Okay.
So my first question is, did you guys know that what you proposed for that original,
Originally?
that was what you should have been held accountable to?
I think, like I said last time I was here, it's an odd situation that we didn't originally own the property, and we got into a contractual real estate agreement that we had 2 months to come up with a concept for 14 acres that's on a very sensitive piece of property, which we knew. So we did it in certain phases where the higher density is lower down where we think it should go, and then we made our way up with the townhomes. And we established a certain style and number, again, with limited time because the seller of the property was putting pressure on us, so we went to the public meeting. Like I said last time, after that happened, we looked at it again, and I'm just going to bring up our PowerPoint here. Okay, this is the pointer. Again, on this. That's just, I think it's been kind of noted here earlier that procedurally, where we see this is that this amendment or change can be made, and I don't think that we have to go through the public opinion or process, but I think that was mentioned earlier. So this is the original, and again, as I said, we were under a lot of pressure to come up with something, so we did. This is what we came up with. Going back, as you can see, we have white horizontal undetermined siding at the time, could have been vinyl, no one really specified. More horizontal siding and vertical metal. How do I go back? The way we say it, this is not a very substantial change. To the left, we have horizontal siding predominantly through the whole thing, and then on the garages, we did some vertical metal, which quite frankly, would probably rust in a few years. And you know, that was one thing determining our change is maintenance through the years. Now that we're selling this, we didn't want to put a whole lot of maintenance on the owners. So we changed it to brick, which we feel is an improvement. And and some eaves, we extended the eaves. Those are the changes that were made. Yes, the garages may be separated, but scale overwise, we presented 36 townhomes, quality townhomes at the public meeting. We're still building 36 quality townhomes.
Yeah, my second question was, I like the look of these townhomes.
Yeah.
I said myself. and
Again,
I'm sure you heard that.
going through, like we discussed, design's subjective, and that's the difficult thing about taking it to public opinion in a public meeting. We all know what happens at those.
And
unfortunately, a minority group of people tend to show up, and they're quite
Leads me to
antagonistic when they get there.
And I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Nobody really wants to go back to public meetings to
Yeah.
try and keep it on focus, that it was just on design, not on the project, not on all the other issues that people have problems with.
Yeah.
But why did you pull it? Why did you not show up?
What?
Why did you just not come and just get this piece over with when it was already a direction to council? Why did you pull your application that night?
We switched it and we turned into a process where we got into a situation where we were able to get the foundation permit, and that the process going to that public meeting would have tied that up, to my knowledge.
I think that's too bad that,
Yeah.
you know, I think it would have been a simpler,
Yeah.
we were prepared to kind of
Yeah.
try and present it the proper way.
Well,
It just,
yeah.
it's kind of, yeah, it's tough.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Compared to some other projects that have been approved without public consultation, I think ours is a pretty positive move forward for Charlottetown.
Yeah. I don't think there's any, it's just, when you're dealing with site-specific extension, each process has to come back, and then when there's changes made, the lesson learned here is that the public was presented a certain picture, and there's changes. And again, it keeps getting reiterated. If we were to come back with a lesser quality product, I can see why we'd be here debating, Right.
but we're not. And again, like I said, we were under a tight timeline. Again, if we had a year to sit down and thoroughly go through the development of the property, we would have had that more time. But again, we were under pressure. Knowing these contracts and development agreements and signing quite a few of them over the past years, we knew what was in there, and we knew that contractually we would be able to make that change because of that Section 3. So we really didn't see it as being a significant fault on the project. So we just proceeded again. In our mind, we're improving. We improved it. So.
Yeah.
Where we're at.
So just to clarify Councillor McCabe's question, so the night of the public meeting it was pulled, and your explanation of that is because of the other permit that had to be in process first.
I think we wanted to deal with the foundation permit, and again, we're heading into winter.
Which makes sense. The foundation should be done first. Yeah. But it's very confusing, when we have to make this decision.
Yeah.
It all adds to the complexity, and, that just how difficult the decision is really.
Yeah, again, like I said, we wanted to get started with construction. We feel that we're still providing, we feel a better product, so we figured, well, we'll deal with it in a more timely manner, and
Yeah.
hope that everyone can have some time to think about it.
And I do, like I said, I can concur that I like it better. If
Yeah.
I buy one, I wouldn't buy a first brand, I might buy a second brand.
Yeah.
Second on that,
Yeah.
you know, are you at a point where you can't bring this back to a public meeting just to show the public? Are we to a point where we can't still maintain what we had before, which was to keep it the way it was, where you came to the public to present it? Like, is that gonna really put a big stiff in your development plans
Yes. We need to
in
proceed.
the next 2 weeks?
We're ready to frame. We're ready to start framing. So. I can appreciate public opinion, but you know, where does it, you know, are we gonna let them pick our flooring out too,
Yeah.
you know? Bad analogy, but,
Yeah.
you know, again, like I said, we're still providing a pretty nice product.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much
All
for
right,
coming in.
thank
and
you.
We'll be in touch.
Forward to it.
Thank you. Okay, so we've pretty well heard it all. So we're clear with the fact that staff is prepared to make a recommendation.
I just wanted to clarify one thing with Mr. Kane's presentation.
Yes,
Staff and the department could have worked with the developer on the foundation permits. The design is separate from foundation permit.
yeah. Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
Well,
And-
there's too much.
But this is why it's circling back, is because a part of that agreement was that they had to deal with this at some point, and now's the time. So, I guess, we, you know, I don't know where you just wanna go. I think it's, you know, at the end of the day, we're here to do business. I don't know if I feel comfortable really slowing it down. I think we got staff's recommendation that they agree with number one. It is a nicer look, but, you know, that's why we're here.
I would be prepared to put a motion on the floor to recommend to council, providing page 54 is amended,
Right?
like every other first item, and it says on there that.
Staff's
If
recommendation.
it doesn't say that, then I'm not.
Yeah, I think we're quite prepared to do that, right? It'll say staff's recommendation. Alex? you good?
No, like, again, it's,
Okay,
Excuse me?
yes, son.
I would just recommend that in the communication around this, that there be some rationale given for why it's come back to this committee and why we're making different recommendations.
Well, that'll probably
We
happen,
need to really clarify that
Yeah.
for our public,
Yeah.
who read about our
Yeah.
meetings and,
yeah.
you know.
Well, I think that'll,
We look at the same issue and we make different recommendations, like 6 weeks apart. So I think we need to be able to
yeah.
explain.
Well, I think, you know, anyone that's watching tonight is seeing that, you know, the page is good, right? This isn't necessarily a bad thing what we're doing here this evening, right? It's, we're trying to get to the bottom of it, and it'll be my job tonight of council, probably, to explain this to the council, who in turn the public sees it again, right? And I'm sure some council will be asking the same questions you're asking, right? And I'll have to take the feed from tonight and the staff's recommendation and present it, and it goes from there. But, you know, the council will want to see a recommendation from this body. In turn, we wanted to see a recommendation from staff. So we're at that stage now. We're going to make a recommendation here, and we'll go forward.
I agree with Alana, based on the word change, I'd be prepared to proceed.
Okay, so we got a mover to go with staff's recommendation of number one.
and
Oh,
just
sorry.
in regard to like it's pretty easy to deal with the 58, page 58, recommend option one, but the
Right.
first page will look similar to that because there is a decision in there. I mean,
Right.
staff, it can go either way, but staff will recommend one. So the first page, 54, will be the
Right,
same.
yeah.
There's two
Well,
options, staff are recommending option one.
Well, option one, which is what
In
we,
every other report we have, the first thing we get is the recommendation in every other report. So that recommendation should be on that first page.
But not every other recommendation, you gotta realize that it goes back to the original purpose of why it's looping back. Not everything, it's the only zone where things loop back to council. So it's council's decision, staff are prepared to support it, but it's still council's decision. to say yes or no. That's why it's set up on option 1 or 2. That's up to them to decide. We're gonna recommend that you pick one of the two.
Yeah.
And it's up.
So therefore, it should be on the first page. You find me one other report that was ever presented to us that doesn't have a recommendation on the first one. And then
Just-
I'll
yeah.
let it go.
But all I'm indicating is that when we change page 54, it'll look like page 58 with recommendation.
The CDA zones, when there is a difference, we don't normally recommend. We point out the differences. If this was exactly the same, we would say it is in line with the concept plan, like I did with the site plan. This is the way we've handled the CDA zone for years.
And that's a good point, because if this was the same, there wouldn't be a recommendation. We would say it's the same, and then council would make the decision. But we're prepared to do it in this case to make this thing move along.
Right.
Thank you. And can we go back to Charlotte's question of the original question that you asked? Can you repeat that question you asked so I can get a clear answer?
Structural changes.
Just about whether we deem it significant change, is that what you mean?
If it goes back to that question, because that's what design would be, correct?
That's
We'd be
the
sitting here.
crux of this. Do you deem it significant enough to go back to a public meeting, or is it minor, where staff can approve?
I mean, I kind of have a problem that we just voted on this a few weeks ago, and now we're, like, they kind of pulled out of the meeting, and now we're changing our vote. Like, I kind of feel like that just feels wrong. Yeah. And I kind of feel like we're left no choice, because they already poured the footings, which means they can't go back to the other design, even if.
But that was my
So-
point, even though one's not directly connected to the other, one is directly connected to the other, because A plus B will give you C, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're building something.
So, I mean, there's not really any point in going back to the public meeting, because
No.
it can't be reverted, I think.
And I think the main difference is the fact that we have two options, whether we feel it's strong enough to go back in public or not. The last time we didn't have a kind of a strong feeling from staff, which one of those two they felt comfortable with, right? So, which makes our job a lot easier if we have that recommendation and through Alana's eyes, having staff at least give us one of those two options that they feel comfortable with makes our job a little bit easier, because we're not the professionals either, right? And if planning staff are strong, aren't overly concerned about it, well then the question for us then becomes, from the eye, from the public, is this pleasing or not? Well, I think we're all in favor that it's a much pleasing, more looking development than what was there before. And to Mr. Kane's words was that it's also more easier to maintain too as well, right, than before. So as long as we're comfortable with, I think Alana, the recommendation at the front would usually say that seeking recommendation from planning board, and then going to the deal that there was two options, and that staff recommends option 1, and we're seeking planning board's
Just to point
recommendation
out,
from there.
Our recommendations generally say that staff encourages the board
Right.
to recommend.
Right.
We don't say recommend, we encourage you to recommend or not
Right.
recommend.
Right. So
So in case that report's amended and you see encourage, that's how we
Right.
generally recommend, so.
yeah, I think if we went with what we always did before, I think it'd be great, right? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor by Councillor Yankoff, seconded by Resident Member Bob Kenny, to move with the recommendation of staff for option 1. All those in favor, put up your hand. Basil?
In favor.
Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, I didn't see your hand.
Can you abstain from voting because I'm having difficulty with this whole scenario?
Just pass it on to council, eh?
Abstain is a yes.
Pardon me?
Abstain is a yes.
Abstain is a yes, I see.
Okay, so we have, just one more time your hands, so Basil was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor, and all those against, Shallon and Councillor McCabe. Okay, are we good?
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thanks, good job.
Thank you, everybody. This is we've had a couple of tough ones here. I appreciate everyone's patience. Number 5, 404 Maverick Road. Ah, Laurel, you're leaving. You're leaving us.
Oh, I thought you meant it was me. Did I miss something?
She needs a break.
I'm just teasing you. Good job. Evan's got the floor.
All right. So I'm presenting on an application for a new proposed importance drive-through business located at 404 Mount Edward Road. The property.
Excuse me, I'm so sorry. The last time we had a Tim Hortons drive-through, I was told I was in conflict.
Okay.
So I don't know why I was, but so I don't know whether I should leave or not.
Oh.
Maybe just was it because you were in conflict with the applicant or?
Yes.
Because apparently because the applicant's brother is the chair of the board to which the organization I work for.
Again, I don't know the answer to that, but if you were told that by, the powers
So
that be.
I should step up.
Yeah.
Just to be on the safe
side.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did not mean to interrupt.
No problem.
Yeah.
No, that is, thank you very much.
Yeah, and you just kind of give me a little.
Yeah, we'll let you know when
The
we're,
last one, isn't it?
when we're back at it.
Before Roberts.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, carry on, Ev.
So the property in question fronts onto Mount Edward Road and includes the back buildings that you can see here and here, as well as the shared access here. So this would be the property frontage right here. So the application is before Planning Board today as the Zoning and Development Bylaw, section 44.8.1, states that council shall determine the queuing space required by a drive-through eating and drinking establishment. Just as a little bit of context, the subject property here is outlined in blue. It's located north of the Charlottetown bypass, and it's adjacent, just directly north to the Centennial Mazda property. There are currently 2 commercial buildings on site. There is a smaller one that you can see right here, a little bit closer to Mount Edward Road, that is currently vacant. It was the former storefront for Deluxe Splash Pool sales, and it is proposed to be removed because this kind of grassy portion here is where the development is proposed to be located. And then in behind, there's another commercial development here. It's a heavy truck repair shop that is currently in use and is proposed to remain. So here is the proposed site plan for the development. To the left here, you can see Mount Edward Road, and this building back here would be the heavy truck commercial building that I just spoke to. So it's kind of located on that narrow lot. And the proposed development meets all setback requirements of the zone. The building itself is proposed to be 2,312 square feet in size. Its main access will come off of the existing asphalt lane here that serves Centennial Mazda, as you can see right here. And it has 1 loading zone, 22 parking spaces, plus 3 barrier-free parking spaces, and the queuing space has a proposed capacity of 28 motor vehicles. And so the queuing space begins here and then goes all the way up to the window, so it starts counting right here. So with this proposal, there was a traffic study, impact study submitted. And the conclusions of the traffic impact study found that the current Trans-Canada Highway and Mount Edward Road intersection at bypass is currently operating efficiently with no significant delay during peak AM and PM travel periods. It is estimated that the proposed Tim Hortons development will generate 278 trips to and from the site during the peak AM hour and 158 trips during the peak PM hour. Therefore, the traffic impact study recommends that the 75-meter long left turn lane be lengthened by 58 meters to avoid vehicle blockage that may result from traffic generated by the proposed development. And in terms of queuing space, which is what this application is here for at this time, the traffic study relays that a 25 vehicle queue space should provide sufficient capacity to handle peak demand without the drive-through queue interfering with site circulation, parking, or access. However, staff do not find a 25 queue space to be adequate based on the calculations that were provided in the traffic impact study because the site plan has changed. The impact study reported that the traffic generation data used for the report is derived on the square footage of the building. The traffic impact study based the report on an older site plan which showed the Tim Hortons as being 1,800 square feet in size, where the new plan shows it being 2,300 square feet in size. So the 1,800 foot one then required 25 queuing spaces, where the 2,300 one is showing 28 queuing spaces. But staff proposed that changing the floor area from 1,800 square feet to 2,300 square feet represents a 25% increase in size, and that the queuing space should be increased proportionally. Therefore, the queuing space should be increased from 25 spaces to 31 spaces, not to 28 spaces. In terms of comments, the Planning and Heritage Department has received comments from the province and the Department of Public Works on this application. It's in the opinion of the province that the proposal can be accommodated. Scott Adams, the manager of Public Works, has commented that any road upgrades identified by the study would be at the cost of the developer, and we have not received any comment from the Charlottetown Police at this time.
They always comment. Will the police always provide an opinion?
I am not sure.
I may be able to answer. I mean, we will get an opinion before the council meeting, but the police service always was the primary, person to give staff clarity as to what they wanted. But Mr. Adams has been doing more of that in tandem with a traffic study and the traffic engineer of the province. That's not to take anything away from the police, but we will certainly make sure for the council.
Yeah, it's nice to get different perspectives.
And the application is with the Charlottetown Police. We just haven't received it.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
So planning staff, the department encourages planning board recommend council approve the proposed drive-through building at 404 Maverick Road, subject to signing a development agreement requiring 31 queuing spaces, and agree to the proposed upgrades to Maverick Road at the cost of the developer. And the representatives of the applicant are here if planning board has any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Evan. Do we have any questions to discuss amongst yourselves first, or do we want to hear from the applicant? Or?
The recommendation to go with the 31 car queuing space, there's room for that, I take it?
There may have to be some revision to the site plan as presented. I am not sure. There appears to be space on this side. I'm not sure how much capacity they have for that. And by no means am I a traffic engineer. I'm just going with the proportional size change to recommend the size of the queuing change.
But the development agreement would have to have that put in place that the 31 would be available.
Yeah. And the applicant may have
Yeah,
a reason
we
why
share
they
that.
specifically
That's
went with 28.
Sure. Rosemary?
I just had a question around the upgrades to Maverick Road. What are the timelines around that? And does the applicant proceed with building the Tim Hortons and then do the upgrades, or what's the timing around that?
Again, Mr. Adams and I did meet with the applicants, and Mr. Adams did provide some clarity for this meeting. The province is suggesting that be done prior to the opening. So again, I would defer to Mr. Adams, who will be back shortly, to work that out with the applicant in regard to their obligations. I mean, they generally know what they're going to be committed to do, but when pen gets to paper and they work that out, I will be reflecting in the development agreement what those two agree to and the police service.
Right.
So, but I think it would be preferable to have that done before the store opens, because there'll be immediate pressure on the intersection, and they just don't want to. It's not huge upgrades, but it's something that would that intersection would function more readily if it was done in And, when you hear from the applicants, they may comment on that as well.
And anything in the meantime, I'm sure we could rely on Al Bear, the other engineer that Public Works to kind of fill into as well. Any other questions, Rosemary? You good? Clear? Okay. Do we want to bring the applicant in? We might as well, right? Okay.
It's nice to see Tim Rogers not right in the intersection.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was going to say that.
That used to be the best lane there.
They got lots of queuing, but they'll use it all.
Oh, yes.
There's going to be all that development across the way from here too.
Can I just rush him?
Was there a traffic study done after that projection?
Yes.
That development that's going to be all across the street from this area?
It's a pretty detailed report, but we've been primarily just based upon their development here.
This development, not the whole
Yeah.
one that's coming across the highway.
Don't think so.
Welcome, gentlemen, to Planning Board.
Good evening. Thank you for your patience, and it's always fun when you are the last on the agenda, and it's been a tedious work through. So I'd like to make this very simple. The reason we're here is because of the requirement to get either the traffic police department to make a recommendation or to have an engineering study done to provide direction in terms of the adequacy of the site, and it's queuing. And we engaged Don Good, who is a well-established traffic engineer, to do his study. And he did recommend that based on the preliminary information that he worked with, that 25 queuing spaces would be adequate for the footprint that was shown at the time. As was pointed out, the building is a little bit larger, and the 30 space, how many spaces in your report? 31. So we have no problem with adjusting the site plan to meet the 31 spaces. It's 1.5 acres that we have to work with, and that's really a tuning exercise, not really a significant issue. So we would like to begin to work with staff to move to the development agreement stage if council so endorses us to do so. And we're not in a fast-track position. We're not trying to get a foundation in the ground before November. So unlike some other projects that are driven on a different time clock, we're really trying to plan and do it in an organized way and alleviate some of the pressure on other sites that are operated so that we can balance out the traffic within the city and service what has been sort of evident in tonight's presentation when you've got other developments that are taking place on the Mount Maverick Road northern precinct of the city. It really is a growth area, and it's one that's changing, and providing the services to support that is really what this facility is doing.
Sure.
Any questions?
Any questions? I think Resident Member Bob Kennedy just stepped out, but I think he had a question on, is there the space? And I think you've answered that for the queuing. You have, there's Bob there now. We're just talking about your queuing question, that you were wondering if there was space.
Oh,
Absolutely, we can accommodate 31 spaces on site and not have any impact with the street.
great.
It's good to see one that doesn't back out into the street.
Yeah,
We're planning ahead.
Yeah, good planning, right?
yeah, there used to be lots of space there.
Any other questions for these fine gentlemen? You're getting off the hook easy.
No, it's moving to the next stage.
Prepares to
We're
be-
not great, so it makes it easy for us,
Be-
because I'll move.
Good to be
this forward.
prepared.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would move the chair to support the recommendation staff to move on to the next.
Okay, we have a mover, accepted by Chris Fournier, that we go with staff's recommendation to go to the development agreement process. All those in favor? Basil?
In favor?
Thank you very much. You good there, Ellen? Good. Thank you very much, folks. We're getting there. Where are we? Number 7, is it? Number 6. That's, oh yeah, the water development being dealt with at another time.
Right back here.
Yeah,
I'm not putting my coat on because I'm rushing.
It's cold.
I'm putting my coat on because I am.
it is cool, yep. Number 7, short-term rental regulatory framework. And Robert is here to give us a presentation. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So before you tonight is the long sought after short-term rental proposed regulations. So I just want to state first off that Planning Board, now you've seen David Walksmith's report. There was 5 scenarios. Scenario 1, which was the most restrictive, which is principal residence only, excluding apartments. And then that goes all the way to scenario 5, which, permits it in apartments, permits commercial STRs in commercial zones. That would permit a hotel or a motel or anything like that. And so essentially what staff's coming before tonight with a proposed recommendation is scenario 1. So scenario 1 is basically principal residence only, apartments excluded. So that's what staff is bringing forth tonight. That's the content of the report. That's, if you look at the attachments, save and accept the official plan, proposed policies to include short-term rentals and the sharing economy. Those are what the regulations tonight before you is to proceed to public meeting on the basis that short-term rentals are only permitted in the principal residence, and it excludes apartments from this. So that, I'm just going to set the tone right away. It's the most restrictive for sure. I'm sure everyone will hear about that. It will prove to be an interesting public meeting, but that's what we're recommending to proceed with. And part of that recommendation is to rescind the previous scenario, or what was called option. Option 4, and that was adopted by council back in March 9th of 2020. So basically what staff's just requesting is that the original option, which was originally option 3, but then council changed to option 4, be rescinded, and we pursue with what I would call is this option or scenario 1, which is the most restrictive. So on the PowerPoint here, I actually go into other recommendations. I won't dwell on those as much. Those can be referenced later, but I would encourage members of Planning Board, if you've not already, to just perhaps look at the technical background report that staff prepared. This is a good brief because at a high level it goes over basically all the data that we've accumulated either through data scraping software, consultation with Professor Walksmith and the McGill Lab, as well as tourist information that we got from the provincial registry. We also include all the public consultation that we've done so far, the response that we've received, and then best management practices for short-term rentals across the country. So it's a jurisdictional scan that goes over how larger municipalities have done this, and they've done it, one could argue, successfully. Their regulations have been challenged at provincial tribunals, and they've come out on top. So it's something to look forward as an example and kind of strive towards. And so all that information is kind of included in the technical background report. So I won't get too much into detail tonight. For the purpose of tonight, I just want to go over just a high level of what and then how a short-term rental could operate in the city of Charlottetown if adopted and approved by council. So first to start, we're going to insert or proposing to insert 2 policies in the official plan. Currently, the official plan is very much out of date. Definitely predates the sharing economy, especially from the mass sharing economy that a lot of apps like Airbnb and VRBO have come about since then. So we're going to basically create a policy that talks about how short-term rental operation has to be still conducive to the residential character of the area. So that's to maintain the residential neighborhood character. So that's one of the first policies. Second policy is there's a section in the OP that says supporting home occupations. Staff is proposing that this is still treated as such. It's a home occupation through the tourist accommodation section of the zoning bylaw. So this, we're just we're basically providing clarification that yes, you can operate short-term rental, but it has to be registered with both the province and it has to be also registered with the city of Charlottetown. So you have to have both registrations to be legal. You can't have one without the other. And that's just going to be embedded into the OP. Now, starting off, the first big change that we are recommending to pursue forward is to allow for secondary and garden suites, one or the other, because as you know, the bylaw only permits you to have one, not both. But if the owner or the operator host is currently living on the property and that's their principal residence, which means their driver's license, their taxes, everything's registered to that residence, then they have the ability to utilize either their secondary suite or their garden suite, if the property's large enough, for a short-term rental purpose, on the condition that they're present at the time of stay. So in this situation, this is one of the requirements where we would require that the host or the operator be at time of stay, that they be located at least on the residence if their suite is being rented out for a short-term rental or their garden suite. So a garden suite is basically an accessory structure that's utilized for that purpose.
So if I may just interrupt, so the house, the main dwelling would still have to be, the owner would have to be there?
Correct,
If he's renting out the garden suite?
Correct,
Right.
yeah.
But both can't be rented out?
No.
Even if you have a cottage?
Even if you have a cottage,
Right.
no, that's
Okay.
right, yeah. The reason for that is that we don't want it into a situation where we have, say I have a house and a secondary suite, and now I'm kind of dually renting the secondary suite and also the house to two different parties.
Right.
That also becomes an issue from a code perspective.
Right.
So there's a lot of safety issues that come into play from that. So that's why through conversations and looking at other jurisdictions, they've always required, well then the owner or the host has to be at least present in the main dwelling unit at the time of stay in case something happens. They're there to help or assist.
Good.
The second one is, and this is basically outlining exactly how we're going to define a short-term rental. We're going to define a short-term rental as a tourist home. So the tourist homes are already defined in both the Provincial Tourism Act, and we actually had tourist home referenced in the zoning bylaw under tourist accommodations, but it was never defined, say like a bed and breakfast was defined or a heritage inn. So now we're saying, well, we'll call it a tourist home, and we're now going to define what a tourist home. That's a short-term rental of your unit, and these are the minimum criteria you have to meet. So it can occur in any dwelling unit except for apartments. Has to be your principal residence. The entire dwelling unit part there could be rented to one guest or party of their guests. So in this instance, if you do not own a secondary suite and you're not using it for short-term rental purposes, you can rent out now your entire dwelling unit, that's fine, and you don't have to be present during time of stay. So to your previous question, Mr. Chair, if I'm out on vacation, say I'm going to the cottage for the weekend, I want to rent out my house that I live in for the rest of the year, I can now do that, and I don't have to be there at time of stay. So now that's not a requirement because you're renting the entire dwelling unit out to only one party of guests.
Right.
The code upgrades kick in when you start renting out like a building to multiple guests that don't know each other, because then you start getting into exiting and stuff like that, fire alarm systems, smoking, like all those things. So we just want to keep it really simple. So basically, if you have your whole house, you can rent out that entire dwelling unit to a party of guests, and then you don't have to be present at time of stay. So that's fine. We are staying with a maximum of 4 bedrooms to be rented at a time, so we're keeping with that number. That number was actually already used in bed and breakfasts under like R1L zones. So the only time that usually you can exceed 4 bedrooms is if you have like a heritage inn, or you have a large dwelling that's probably located in like an R3 or an R4 zone. So we don't expect that there's many of those. We expect that this will just really hone in on those properties that are really like single detached dwellings, duplexes, semis, things of that nature. and we still have a section for bed and breakfast and heritage inn. So none of that will change for those operations. They all can operate as long as they have a license. They can operate. But this is kind of what we're proposing for a tourist home. And I've already gone into that. The operators don't have to stay at time to stay. So, and then so we define also parking requirements as well. Currently in the bylaw, it broadly describes or requires parking for tourist accommodations. Under the tourist accommodation section of the bylaw, we're separating bed and breakfast, heritage inn, and tourist home apart from each other. B&Bs, heritage inns, you know, they have, they usually rent out per room because there's going to be multiple guests that don't know each other, but the operator or proprietor must be on site at the time of stay, right? So we just included a tourist home to be 2 spaces minimum. And the reason rationale for that is that, you know, ideally you would have 1 space for the principal residence, the owner, and then you have one space for the guests. So that's kind of the parking requirements that we threw in there.
And that wouldn't, the tourist home, that's a different kettle of fish altogether, right?
Yeah, like so the tourist home's now just basically an STR. So we would refer to short-term rental as a tourist home now.
Right.
And we would just say for a tourist home, instead of 1 parking space for every 3 bedrooms, like a B&B, where say you could have like, I know some heritage inns have like 9 rooms.
Right.
So you would need like 3 parking spaces on site. Well, in a lot of instances, like you might not need that if I'm just renting out a bungalow, right? Like I might just need like 2 parking spaces or 1 for the guests, so.
I just think like down in the 500 lot, you know, 1 space is probably, in some places, right, you're only gonna have 1 parking space. So how does that work?
So then, that's one thing that we're gonna actually put towards council to make a decision if you want to take cash in lieu. So if you can't provide a on-site parking in the 500 lot area, should you pay a cash in lieu contribution for that space? So that's something.
That's a good topic.
Yeah. So, but there was some conversation around that, so we thought we would kind of just proceed with kind of this.
1 second. Go ahead, Councilor Yankoff. You had a question on that part of it?
Just for clarity for the public, are we going to confuse the public by, all along we've been referring to it as an STR, and now we're calling it a tourist home? Is that going to confuse the public? Or not? I'm just, unless it's going to be made very clear that here's the definition, this now equals this?
Yeah.
Okay, right in front of my eyes, never mind.
And so, no, and that's absolutely a fair point, Councilor. Actually, it very much so it is. And that's something that we were discussing internally about, you know, should we just call it short-term rental? But for clarity's sake, just from if we were appealed or we had, you know, on an application, we can say, listen, the PI Act, Tourism Act, defines what a tourist home is, which is basically the rental of a private dwelling. City of Charlottetown agrees with that definition, and we're going to incorporate that as well. Yeah. But to ensure that there's no confusion on that, we actually do define short-term rental, and then we define what a tourist home, and a tourist home being a short-term rental lodging. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So we do provide the definition for that. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So that is the definitions of booking. The booking definition is that gets into eventually, if we move towards a licensing bylaw, then we'll have to start using terminologies. So you'll see some definitions that might not be referenced in the bylaw, but it will be referenced in the future in another bylaw. Principal residence, this is interesting. This is where we flat out define what a principal residence is. It's a longer definition. It's one of the better definitions that I saw, and I know that the City of Ottawa did this through their licensing bylaw. We use principal residence in some terminologies of the bylaw itself, so that's why we're seeking to insert that into the zoning bylaw definitions, because we're basically defining like, well, you can only have an STR in principal residence. Oh, well, what does a principal residence mean? And then we're going to clearly define it in there. So it's a pretty lengthy definition, but it has to be because when we get into the issue of short-term rentals, and specifically we get into commercial operations where we're suddenly having corporations, legal entities that are buying up properties, right, and they're not a natural person, that gets into issues with commercialization of STR. So that's why we want to kind of head that off and say, no, you have to be a natural person, you have to have ownership, it has to your taxes, license, all of that. You have to prove that is your principal residence all year round. So that's a way to kind of tackle that commercialization piece. Like I said, we've defined what a short-term rental is. We amended the tourist accommodations just to include bed and breakfast, a hostel or tourist, tourist home, and tourist home, because it's technically a tourist home is an STR, but it's still considered a tourist accommodation under the home occupation. So we're still saying that if you're going to STR your residence out, that's still home occupation, right? So you still need to get approval from the city. You still have to get that permanent approval that I have a home-based business license here that I can operate. So we're really we're clamping down and making sure our definitions are in line with everything. When we pursue licensing and registration, it should all work in tandem when that piece comes along. But that is essentially kind of the, I guess, the high-level notes. But for what your folks are concerned, this is essentially what a short-term rental can be in the city of Charlottetown, what we're proposing to bring forward to the public hearing. So with that, I can take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. There's been a lot of work done, Robert. Because what I think, for me, you already mentioned it as well, Councillor Yankoff, about the tourist home. We've had so much terminology, it's very confusing as to, and I see now Robert's kind of grouping it all together, and it's kind of making life a little more simple to kind of grasp. I think that's what I see out of this anyway, Robert. So appreciate all the hard work. Any questions for Robert?
I just have a quick observation. Thank you, Robert, for another great report. I think this is great that we're getting this to council and a recommendation then to move on to public consultation. And just nice to see this process getting to the next step. So thank you again for your report.
Yeah, I think it's been...
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
It's kind of an inappropriate question to ask this group, but we were hoping, because we thought we were going to be out of COVID, and we wanted, public meetings are better when people can get into a smaller space and they can talk. It would appear that Ellen and I are trying to go back to the Confederation Center. It's one of our tasks to try to anticipate what people are most comfortable in, and we need to get onto that quickly. Would it be this group's impression as councillors and board members? If you were a member of the public and you were heading out to a meeting on this, would you prefer the bigger venue, which would be the Confederation Center?
I think we're going to need a bigger venue.
So, I mean,
Absolutely.
it would be either the Charlottetown Hotel if COVID was disappeared. There's a dynamic in a meeting when people are closer together, they can talk to their colleagues, but it's much more spread out. But I think in the interest of safety and things like that, we will move to it. It's a more expensive venue, but.
And that leads me to the next question on, as of tomorrow, the new rules for public health. How does that work with public meetings? Do people have to be double vaxxed?
They're gonna have to be.
Well, Confederation Center, if it was Confederation Center, or would be asking for a double vax. Yeah.
I don't know about public councils and public meetings, what the criteria is with the public health office on that.
We will certainly.
Yes, you'll find that.
Yeah, sure, we'll follow that, but by the time COVID's over, Ellen and I will be medical doctors. But again, I mean, we want to get this right. People have been waiting a long time, and again, it's just such a big venue, and people are separated, but in the interest of public health, it's a better venue, and people, I think, are more comfortable there. But I didn't want to run a big venue, and then people go, why did you get the big venue?
It would be too confusing to do a series of meetings, like maybe Monday, Wednesday.
But that's difficult too,
I
because
know, it's
you
not
need
work.
everybody in the room, and what the reason that the Confederation Center works is that they break it into quadrants. If you were at that public meeting, if you crossed one of those hallways, the Confederation Center was not happy with us because we had some staff that are trying to control it, and we did a pretty good job, but it's just different times, but it's
And
really.
everybody hearing the same message is important. important too, I think.
Right.
You know, where everybody hears the same.
So really, when you use the Confederation Center, you're running 4 meetings. You're running 4 quadrants with a maximum of people in each quadrant. But they can all see and participate, and staff are up on the stage, and we're fine up there, but it's just that it can be intimidating. It's intimidating enough. That's why I would prefer if we could have just a better, more intimate venue, but I think that we need the Confederation Center myself, so I got my direction, thank you.
How many people would you suspect will be, what did we have the last time?
Well, I was hoping that if with this clarity, I'm anticipating the numbers will go down, but I don't know that. We don't know. And there was a stakeholder group that didn't show up at the STR. Owners did not show up at the Confederation Center. So that's not a good. They had their reasons for not showing up as well. So it's better to be safe than sorry in regard to the space. We only want to run 1 meeting, so we'll use the Confederation Center. We'll follow all of the protocols, and but it's important that we get this one right. And again, we don't want to be back to where we were in 2019, Rob, when we started this. We were heading to a public meeting, and COVID shut it down. So we want to get this one finished.
But you're doing it the right way, because sometimes when you rush things, then you miss
So-
things.
And maybe my last comment on this is that as this goes through, I had a comment with a colleague of mine in another part of the country, and they were dealing with accessory dwelling units, and he just commented that they opened it up really broadly initially. Now they're trying to pull back, and they're having a problem pulling it back, legally pulling back some things. And I guess what we're suggesting, if as we move forward, if we can bring some the regulation to the first group, then if council in its wisdom, the next council or additional councils want to open it up further, we'll have caught up with all of our regulations and have encountered all of the pitfalls that may occur. But if you open it too broadly initially, it's we have a lot more inspections to do. So some people may perceive that it's fairly this opening position of staff is very conservative, but there's a reason for that, and that doesn't mean that position can't change at a later date. And that's still up to council. Council can do what they want. They can go from the option 1 to option 5 if they so desire.
So if I may, so we had the public meeting, and so we only had one side of the fence there. You're expecting to have both sides of the fence there?
Well, they should be. I mean, it's in any, like a good public hearing, you should have all stakeholders in the room.
From a control point though, it's going to be hard to control that many people in a room.
Well,
with the difference of opinions, right?
Well, it's not so much the difference of opinions. When you're at the Confederation Center under COVID conditions, it's the same as at the hotel. They're very cautious. They don't want to. The hotel itself, as a corporate entity, doesn't want to get in trouble with the Department of Health. And so, after the public meeting we had the last time, and Ellen and I got some follow up from the Confederation Center that if you want this to use the venue again, it will just run a little bit smoother. No real deal breakers, but we're all adjusting in this COVID reality. So. We know what their expectations is at the Confederation Center.
Okay, I'm good.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you very much. So we don't need we don't need for this.
This will go on. Yeah, you should have a recommendation.
Yeah,
we do a recommendation.
Forward on the council.
We asked recommendation to rescind option 4
yes, right.
from March 9th, 2020, and then move forward with the recommendations. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we have a mover, Rosemary.
Yes.
Do I have a second to that one? Councilor Danko. All those in favor? Mr. Hambley? Still there, Basil?
In favor.
In favor?
In favor.
Thank you very much. No, his father, I was talking to Mr. Hambley. Okay.
Recommendation proceed to.
What's that, sorry?
Second recommendation?
Well, you need a recommendation forwarded on council, rescind option 4,
Right,
and
which is-
to proceed to a public hearing.
It's all one.
Oh, it's all one.
It's all one.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much. We need one more resolution.
I want to take it in minutes.
Moved by Councilman Cage, second by Councilman Danko.
All in favor?
Adjourned. All